The gravel crunched under the tires of my battered Ford F-150, a sound that usually signaled the beginning of peace. For 10 years, this 2-mile stretch of private easement winding through the upscale meadows at Oakhaven was my only lifeline to my 40-acre organic farm. But today the peace was dead. In the middle of the road stood a pristine white gate gleaming with fresh paint and topped with decorative, yet sharp, wrought iron spikes. Beside it, leaning against a brand new "No Trespassing, Resident Access Only" sign was Beatrice Vance. Beatrice was the self-appointed president of the Oakhaven Homeowners Association. She wore a crisp linen suit in a neighborhood where the mud was currently ankle-deep, and she held a clipboard like a royal scepter. "Afternoon, Beatrice," I said, leaning out the window. "Gate looks expensive. Mind opening it? I've got a delivery of organic compost coming in an hour." Beatrice didn't smile, she didn't even look at the truck, she looked at her clipboard. "Good afternoon, Mr. Miller. I'm afraid this road is now restricted to Oakhaven residents only. The board voted last night. Heavy machinery and what did you call it? Compost are damaging our aesthetic infrastructure." "Aesthetic infrastructure?" I laughed, though my stomach tightened. "Beatrice, this is a legal easement. It's been in my family since before your developers poured their first slab of concrete. It's the only way into my property." "The easement was a courtesy, Elias," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "One that has expired. If you want access, you can apply for a guest pass. It's $400 a month and strictly for passenger vehicles. No trucks, no tractors, no smell." "You're trying to starve me out," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "We are simply maintaining the standards of Oakhaven," she replied, turning her back. "Have a lovely day." The siege of Miller Farm. The next 2 weeks were a nightmare. I tried the legal route first. My lawyer, a tired man named Saul, looked at my deeds and sighed. "You're right, Elias, you have the right of way, but Beatrice has the HOA's legal fund, which is basically a war chest filled by the wealthiest people in the county. They'll tie you up in injunctions for years. By the time we win, your crops will be dead and your bank account will be zero." I couldn't wait years. My heirloom tomatoes were weeks from harvest, and my livestock needed feed that I couldn't haul in on my back. Beatrice had guards at the gate now, private security hired to keep the industrial element out. I sat on my porch that night looking at the ridge that separated my valley from the main highway. It was a steep, rocky incline of shale and limestone. Navigating a truck over it was impossible. But I wasn't just a farmer. Before I inherited this land, I'd spent 12 years as a structural engineer for the mining industry. I knew what lay beneath the dirt. If I couldn't go over the road and I couldn't go through the gate, I'd go under the problem. The low road. I had an old drainage culvert that ran beneath the ridge, a relic from the 1950s meant to handle flash floods. It was narrow, choked with silt, and ended abruptly against a wall of solid limestone about 50 yards short of the public county road. I called my old friend Silas. He was a retired tunnel rat from the Pennsylvania coal mines who lived 3 towns over. "You want to do what?" Silas asked, his voice crackling over the phone. "I need a passage, Silas, wide enough for a small electric cart or a conveyor belt. I need to get my produce out and supplies in without Beatrice Vance seeing a single leaf." "That's not farming, Elias, that's smuggling." "It's survival," I said. 2 days later, Silas arrived with a specialized microborer he'd acquired years ago and a set of hydraulic jacks. We worked in shifts, hidden by the dense tree line of my property. The work was grueling. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and sweat. Every foot we gained felt like a victory against the HOA's tyranny. While Beatrice was busy hosting wine mixers and complaining about the color of her neighbors' shutters, we were moving tons of earth in the dark. "Why go to all this trouble?" Silas asked one night, wiping grease from his forehead. "Why not just sell to the developers? They'd give you millions for this dirt." "Because it's not just dirt," I said, looking at the rows of green life stretching out under the moonlight. "It's a legacy. My grandfather held this land through the Great Depression. I'm not losing it to a woman who thinks nature is something you buy at a garden center." The hidden rot. The breakthrough happened on a Tuesday. We were about 30 feet from the county road boundary when the borer didn't hit rock, it hit something hollow. The drill bit spun freely, and a foul chemical stench filled the tunnel. "Stop," I yelled. We pulled the drill back. I donned a respirator and crawled to the face of the tunnel. I shone a high-powered flashlight through the hole. It wasn't a natural cave, it was a massive, reinforced concrete vault. "What the hell is that?" Silas whispered, peering over my shoulder. "That," I said, my heart racing, "is not on any map I've ever seen." We spent the next 6 hours carefully widening the opening. When we finally broke through, we stepped into a subterranean chamber the size of a school gym. It was filled with rusted industrial drums, many of them leaking a thick, oily sludge into the groundwater. But the real discovery was the paperwork. In a waterproof locker near the entrance of the vault, I found stacks of ledgers and permits dating back 5 years, the exact time the Oakhaven development was built. I recognized the names. The development company wasn't just a group of builders, it was a shell company owned by a conglomerate that specialized in waste management. They hadn't just built a luxury neighborhood. They had used the construction phase to bury thousands of gallons of illegal toxic waste deep in the ridge, sealing it behind concrete and building million-dollar homes right on top of it. And at the bottom of every permit, every inspection report that claimed the land was clean was a signature. Beatrice Vance, lead consultant for Oakhaven Development Group. She wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was the one who had cleared the way for the environmental disaster waiting to happen beneath her neighbor's feet. The gate wasn't just to keep me out, it was to ensure no one ever poked around the edges of the property where the runoff was starting to seep. The climax at the gate. I didn't call the police right away. I knew how small-town politics worked. Beatrice likely had the local sheriff on her Christmas card list. Instead, I finished the tunnel. I spent the next 3 days rigging a series of high-definition cameras and sensors in the vault. I took soil samples and sent them to an independent lab in the city. Then, I waited for the HOA's annual Founders' Day gala. It was a grand affair. A white tent was erected on the lawn right next to the gate. There was a string quartet, expensive catering, and every homeowner in Oakhaven was there, dressed to the nines. I didn't show up in my truck. I walked through my tunnel, climbed out of the hidden exit on the county roadside, and walked up the main entrance of Oakhaven like a guest. Beatrice spotted me immediately. She marched over, her face turning a vibrant shade of purple. "Mr. Miller, you are trespassing on private property. I told you you are not welcome here, guards." The 2 security men moved in, but I held up a hand. "I'm just here to make a presentation, Beatrice, for the Founders' Day celebration. I thought the residents might like to know what they're actually living on." I pulled a small remote from my pocket. I'd spent the previous night borrowing the signal for the giant LED screen the HOA had set up to show a slideshow of the neighborhood's achievements. "What are you doing?" Beatrice hissed, reaching for the remote. I clicked the button. The screen behind her flickered. Instead of photos of manicured lawns, a video played. It was grainy but clear, the inside of the vault, the leaking drums, the Oakhaven Development logo stamped on the concrete. Then, a high-resolution scan of the documents appeared. Beatrice's signature was highlighted in bright red. The music stopped, the clinking of wine glasses ceased. 100 residents stared at the screen in horrified silence. That's a lie," Beatrice shrieked, her voice cracking. "That's a fabrication, he's a disgruntled farmer." "The EPA lab results are already in the hands of the state attorney," I said, my voice calm and carrying across the lawn. "The aesthetic infrastructure you're so worried about, Beatrice, is sitting on a ticking time bomb of mercury and lead. You didn't block my road because of my truck. You blocked it because the soil at the edge of my farm was starting to show the truth." One of the residents, a man who had recently complained about his dog getting sick after playing in the woods, stepped forward. "Beatrice, is that your signature?" She looked at the screen, then at the crowd of people who had once followed her every whim. The mask of the perfect neighbor finally shattered. She didn't offer a defense. She looked at the gate, then at the road, and realized there was nowhere left to run. The resolution. The fallout was massive. The meadows at Oakhaven became a federal Superfund site within a month. The development company was liquidated, and Beatrice Vance ended up facing a laundry list of environmental crimes and fraud charges. The residents filed a class action lawsuit that drained the HOA's accounts to zero. Most of them moved away, their dream homes rendered worthless. As for me, the state seized the road as part of the criminal investigation, and eventually it was deeded back to the county as a public thoroughfare. I don't use the tunnel for smuggling anymore. I turned the county-side entrance into a reinforced cellar for my wine and root vegetables. It's cool, dry, and a constant reminder that the truth has a way of digging its way to the surface. One morning, a few months later, I drove my truck through the spot where the white gate used to stand. The posts were gone, replaced by wildflowers, the air was clear, and the only sound was the wind through the trees. I looked at the ridge, then down at the dirt road ahead of me. The way was open. I reached the farm, hopped out of the truck, and looked at my tomatoes. They were ripe, red, and perfect. I picked one, wiped the dust off on my shirt, and took a bite. It tasted like victory.